We are back for another Sunday Q&A. I hope you're doing well. Let's read over what questions we got today. So, we're going to talk about horizontal versus 45-degree leg press, auto-regulating your training, how to deal with a stressful week, rep scheme progression for people that want to develop strength, marijuana and bodybuilding. Ooh, that should be a fun one. Dealing with callus tears on the hands. How many weeks should you accumulate compared to deloading? How valuable are front squats for hypertrophy when you might just have your upper back give out before your actual quads? And how long should you bulk for? Should you go up to like 18, 20% body fat, or should you go down to, or should you stop it at like 14, 15%? What should you do? Well, we're going to cover all those questions, but the first question of today's Q&A is from Austin. He says, if you're deep into a cut, would you see more benefit having your carbs pre-workout or included in your intra-workout shake? Austin, this is something that I've thought about as well. And man, that's tough. I think that a balanced approach is going to be best here. So I think that having a decent amount in your pre-workout is a good idea, but also having a little bit in your intra-workout. And the way that I would proportion this is I would probably put like, say you have X amount of carbs that you want to allocate towards your pre-workout and intra-workout nutrition. I would probably take like a 70-30 approach to where I would probably put like 70% in that pre-workout to make sure a lot of it's getting digested and that we're ready to go for the session, and that we're feeling pretty full throughout the session, and that we're still digesting a little bit of that throughout the training session. And then I'll probably take the other 30-ish% and have it intra-workout. And the reason why is because, like I said, I would like to be digesting a little bit of that pre-workout meal to be nice and full throughout the session. And I would also want to have some of those carbs digested and kind of stored, if at all possible, by the time I'm training. But I still like having a little bit of that intra-workout because I think that there's some benefits to having that incoming carbohydrate that might help with keeping blood glucose levels high, potentially signaling to the body, hey, we have incoming carbs, we can use these stored carbohydrates, potentially influencing the CNS by having carbs on the ready, because like carbohydrate mouth rinsing has been suggested to be beneficial for, some performance. And I think that there's benefits to having that intra-workout as well. But I would probably take a 70-30 approach to maybe the majority in that pre-workout and then a little bit in that intra-workout as well. And I think that this is especially the case to kind of have that bias is because in that pre-workout meal, you can actually eat your food. And when you're dieting and you don't want to give up carbs for that, drinking them while you're working out, because usually you're not that hungry while you're actually working out anyways. And since you're drinking it, it's probably a fast digesting, not very satiating source of carbs. I would probably go 70-30, 80-20, and not put a ton in that intra-workout meal. So if you had 80 carbs to spare for that pre and intra, I might go 60 grams pre-workout, 20 grams intra. Is probably how I would approach that. Just so you get a little bit of the benefits of that intra, but it might help with adherence, it might help with satiety, it might help with having some more stored energy by having a little bit more in that pre-workout meal. So that's kind of how I would approach that there, Austin. Next question comes from Stolzen, and he asks, horizontal versus 45-degree leg press. So basically a leg press where you're laying down, pushing it at a 45-degree angle versus one where it's kind of just parallel and it's straight across to you. I think about the same, honestly. I think that the range of motion on your legs is going to be pretty similar. I think that if the range of motion is pretty similar, then you can expect a similar pattern of muscle recruitment, and you can expect similar tension to be allocated towards your muscles for both setups. So I really think that they're going to be pretty dang similar, and I wouldn't expect very many differences between the two approaches. And personally, I've always liked the leg press to where you lay down on the ground and your legs are up at a 45. I've liked that a lot better for myself personally compared to the straight across from you. I don't know what about it, but I just like it a lot better. It feels a lot better for me, but I'm sure there's other people that don't like it as much and like the other one more. So I would largely say which one you go with here just depends on personal preference and what you like better. And I wouldn't really expect one to have much of a difference in terms of growing muscle compared to the other. It's kind of what I think there. And you also asked another question. What do you recommend for people like me who spend many hours seated? So I myself spend a lot of hours seated, whether it's editing videos, coaching people online, developing stuff for school, work, everything I do is basically online, sitting at a computer. So what do I do for this? Well, I like to still shoot for a step target a day. So I personally like to get about 8,000 steps a day. So if you sit a lot, maybe it's getting up, taking breaks, walking around. Maybe it's after every meal, which is what I do. After I have a meal, I try to get in like a 5 to 10 minute walk. I find it just kind of relaxes me a little bit. It might help just getting up, moving around, just feels better for digestion. Like, I don't know if this is just me. I doubt it. But after I have a decent sized meal, I kind of don't want to sit down. Like, my stomach feels full, and I like being standing up and having everything like a little bit more expanded. I don't like sitting down, and just it almost feels kind of gross to me, honestly, which is kind of weird. I don't know. Like, if I have to sit down after I eat, that's totally fine, and I feel fine too. But if I had that choice, I like being upright. I don't know if there's anything to that in terms of digestion. I mean, maybe not though. I don't know. But that's what I like doing. And then just getting that 5 to 15 minute walk after I eat helps me get those steps in and helps me feel a little bit better throughout the day. Now, so I would recommend maybe shooting for a step goal to help you out with that if that's something you want to do. Also, something that Dr. Quinn Hennock kind of recommends is that it might be a good idea to just change your position every 20 minutes to a half hour, something in there. And the Revive Stronger podcast had a great episode with Quinn. If you want to go check that out, but just changing your position can kind of help prevent maybe some of these overuse injuries and niggles from just being in the same position all the time. So maybe if you're sitting down, just shifting to the other side, or maybe going from sitting down to standing up for a little bit, which isn't practical for everybody. Like, you're not just going to stand up in the middle of the class and do stuff like that, but maybe you go from leaning back to sitting upright and just being cognizant of, hey, I've literally been sitting on my right haunch this entire time, relaxing like this for the last hour. I need to switch this up. All right, so then maybe it's shifting to a more laid back position or sitting more upright, whatever it might be. Just shifting your position might help a little bit. I personally like getting up and walking around is what I would prefer, but you could also do that. And something else that is kind of pertain to this, but kind of not, is that sometimes when I'm sitting down for a while, I just start to feel kind of meh a little bit. Like, a body at rest likes to stay at rest is kind of how I think of it. And every once in a while, if I'm working at home and it makes sense, I won't do this like out in public or in class or anything like that, but sometimes I will just stand up and I'll do like 15 to 20 push-ups, pace around a little bit, and I'll do another 15 to 20 push-ups, get the blood flowing a little bit, and it kind of energizes me a little bit, and I think it makes me a little bit more productive. That might sound a little woo-woo and what the heck are you talking about, but sometimes I do it if I notice that, man, I've been doing nothing for like 2 hours and I'm starting to feel like, then I just want to get up, get some blood flowing, and it helps me out. So that's kind of what I recommend there. Next question is from Gary, and he's, how do you auto-regulate a stressful week at the end of the mesocycle? And Gary, I feel like I answered this in not last week's podcast, but the Q&A before that. I believe I did. So go check that podcast, the timestamps for that, for auto-regulating a stressful week at the end of a mesocycle. But real quick, how I might approach that is, if you're at the end of a mesocycle, you're planning to deload next week, but it's a stressful week. What do? I personally would try to stick to the plan and just try to deload the following week. Since I know my deload is right there, I would personally do the best I can to just stick to what I had planned. It's going to be hard. Yeah, it also should be hard in your last week before you deload. That's what I would do. But other things you can do is you can just, if you can't get to the gym and you're stressed out, you can just auto-regulate your training volume down a little bit. If not volume, you could not train quite as close to failure. There's a bunch of things you could do to manage your training stress to make a bit more sense. If you, for whatever reason, didn't get much sleep one night, you could just push your training days back a little bit and shorten your deload by a day. So if I was doing an upper lower off, upper lower, and let's say before my second upper day, I was just feeling like garbage, I didn't sleep well at all, then I might just take that Thursday off and then do my upper lower on Friday, Saturday, and then have a 6-day deload and be back to my schedule. So maybe you auto-regulate a rest day if it's really stressful. But I feel like the week before deload, like you're not gonna, those last couple of days, you might feel pretty fatigued in general, and that's okay. It's kind of expected from a training standpoint, but a life circumstance happens. I might throw in an auto-regulated off day, push that back, shorten my deload down to like 6 days. It's kind of how I would approach that there. But I believe I talked about this in a Q&A in the past, but if not, shoot me a message, like email me or something, and I'll get back to you, or DM me. I know you're following me over on Instagram at Ryan J. Solomon. And if you have any questions, you can leave them down below. All right. Appreciate it, guys. Anyways, Aster asks, what would be a good progression scheme for the basic lifts for a guy who just wants to develop strength? What would be a good progression scheme? I would probably say I wanted to get stronger, the big three: bench, squat, and deadlift. I would probably start with 3 or 4 sets of benching and squatting a couple of times a week. And I would keep the majority of those sets in the 4 to 7 rep range. And I would also shoot for a certain reps in reserve on each set. So it might depend. So maybe I'm doing a 3x7 on bench the second half of the week, and I'm doing 3 reps in reserve, and the first half of the week I'm doing a 4x5 with 2 reps in reserve, something like that. I would just use a little bit of variation there, but I would probably start with a frequency of around twice a week for the bench and squat. Deadlift, you could do twice a week. Some people find it beats them up a little bit too much if you're squatting twice a week and deadlifting twice a week. So I might just deadlift once a week and then do a stiff leg deadlift, an RDL, a dumbbell RDL, something like that on the other day, maybe to kind of a similar movement pattern, but maybe a little less stressful. Or you could do like a beltless deadlift on the second half of the week, just so you can't use as much weight, so you still get the movement pattern, but maybe you can't quite overload yourself as much without the belt, or maybe you do it without wrist wraps or something like that, so you can't overload yourself as much. That's kind of a way to limit yourself, but while still providing a pretty good training stress with being specific to deadlifts, but not making it extremely stressful for you. So maybe you try that, but I would have them a couple times a week frequency, rep range, probably in that 4 to 7 rep range, pretty specific to getting stronger. Reps in reserve is probably how I would set up my progression. So I would probably work from 3-ish reps in reserve down to 1-ish reps in reserve across the mesocycle, and really try to focus on getting stronger across the mesocycle at those given reps in reserve targets across the mesocycle. And that's probably how I'd progress things. I probably wouldn't get too fancy with it and, do 5 reps in week 1, 4 reps in week 2, and have that like linear progression to where we're decreasing reps and increasing load. Like, that can work. I definitely think it could work, but I would probably keep reps the same across my mesocycle for a given workout, and probably progress in a way that's closer to failure, adding a bit of weight week to week. And then mesocycle after mesocycle, I'm trying to add weight to that like first session. So let's say in week 1 of mesocycle 1, I bench 225 for 5 reps at 3 reps in reserve. Then mesocycle 2, week 1, I'm going to try to bench 230 or 235 for 5 reps at 3 reps in reserve in that first mesocycle. So I can clearly see that progression. But I wouldn't get too fancy with it probably, and I think that would be a nice basic approach for people to where they're kind of learning reps in reserve. They're kind of figuring out when they can really get after it on a certain day, when their reps in reserve, when the weight just feels light and that sort of thing. And I think that's just a pretty simple, basic way. It's nice and specific to getting stronger because you're doing the lift a couple times a week, and you're also specific to getting stronger to whereas you're working in that 4 to 7 rep range, to where I think is a good rep range, to where you're able to use quite a bit of load to produce strength adaptations, but it's not such lower rep range to where each set is just really fatiguing, but you're not necessarily able to do the movement pattern a whole lot and practice the movement and get some nice quality, good technique reps in. It might be difficult if you're working at such high rep ranges or such low rep ranges, and by working in that 4 to 7 rep range, you're able to get in quite a bit of stimulus on a per set basis, and it's still heavy enough and that sort of thing. So that would be kind of my general approach there, is how I would approach that there, Aster. And the next question is a fun one. So this is from BB_God, longtime follower here. Marijuana and bodybuilding/powerlifting. So first off, I think a really great place or a resource to learn about this is Jordan Feigenbaum had a really cool episode for Barbell Medicine to where he discussed weed and gains. That's what I think he titled it, but it was a really cool episode, and he went over a lot of the latest, like, pretty recent relevant research on weed and gains. So go check that out if you want a little bit more information, but there's not a lot of research on it, and a lot of this stems from because it hasn't been legal in very many places until recently, and that kind of limits how much research you can do on it ethically. So take everything with a grain of salt, because we just don't have much of a body of evidence on marijuana, and especially on bodybuilding and powerlifting. Now, I think that it's unlikely to increase your performance. It wouldn't make sense to me if it was an actual like ergogenic aid to increase your performance. Could it potentially calm someone down before a really important performance? Maybe it could. Would you want that in the setting of bodybuilding, powerlifting? Maybe not. Maybe you would want your arousal to be a little bit higher, but some people get a little bit too aroused and they're not in their like individual zone of optimal arousalness. That's an actual like theory in sports psychology, that you want people in their individual zone of optimal arousal. So Not totally just making that up there, but so I don't see it being a huge benefit there, and you could just like take deep breaths and kind of calm yourself down that way. So I don't see it being like something that's beneficial. I could see it potentially decreasing performance from a point of like calms you down too much, and maybe from a point of decreasing reaction time potentially and motor control and stuff like that. I'm not sure on the potential implications for that. So I don't see much upside to it, like maybe a little bit of stress potentially reducing, maybe some pain reduction in certain specific aspects, but I'm not sure how much that potentially applies to bodybuilding, powerlifting. Some people think that it's going to give them the munchies and could potentially increase your BMI, and I actually don't think that that's supported. I think that the trends actually go the other way, to where marijuana use is more associated with a little bit lower BMIs, but it's pretty dang close and pretty non-significant. So don't think that I'm saying smoke weed to drop weight. Definitely not saying that. What I am saying, though, is that I think, here's my opinion, and by the way, I have nothing wrong. I personally don't smoke, but I have friends that smoke, and I have nothing wrong with it inherently. It's probably not the best idea for people that are under like 22, 25, because your brain's still developing, and there's a chance that it can influence that to a significant degree. So if you're a younger person watching this, do your due diligence and look into the research on how it affects that and know the implications that might have, is what I would do. But in general, if you're a little bit older and you want to experiment with it, I don't have a problem with it. And I just think that for bodybuilding and powerlifting specifically, I don't see many upsides, and there's probably not a ton of downsides from a specific like body composition standpoint. But from a potential, if you're young while you're taking it, like I said earlier, maybe some downsides. From maybe a performance standpoint after taking it, maybe some potential downsides. But we need a bit more evidence, and that's kind of where I stand on it. I don't think that it's necessarily beneficial. Do I think it's necessarily bad inherently or anything like that? No, not really. But I think do your due diligence if you're younger, for sure. Look into the implications that it could have on brain development and stuff like that. But that's kind of where I'm at with that. And I already kind of hated on CBD oil at a previous Q&A, so make sure to go check out other Q&As with my thoughts on CBD oil. I'm not going to go down that road right now, so I'll leave it there. Next question's from C. Jozu 2021. Dealing with callus tears on the hand with barbell exercises. This one's, I don't have a great answer for this because I've never really had my calluses like tear off and have to go through it. But what I think I would do is I might tape my hand with some athletic tape. I might use grips more. I might do that sort of thing, but there's probably not a ton you could do. I probably wouldn't use a bunch of like ibuprofen and stuff before training and just train through the pain. Probably wouldn't do that, but I would probably maybe tape them up and use grips a little bit more. Sorry, this was like a really quick answer, but that's kind of all I can think about to help that. So hopefully that helps you out. Leave a comment below if you want me to elaborate on something more there. The next one's from Ryan Muller. So Ryan is a fellow student of mine at the university, and he says, how many weeks of accumulation before you usually deload? So I used to always do like 4 or 5 weeks of working up and up and up and then deload. But I've actually changed that to a 3 up, 1 down approach. So 3 weeks, accumulating, 1 down. And I didn't really do this because I think it's more optimal for gaining muscle. I did it because it's more optimal for my life. Like, I really like having 1 week every month to where it's a low stress week to where I'm only in the gym 2 days a week. And both of those sessions are like an hour at the most. And it's a nice week to catch up on anything I need to catch up to, spend more time with doing things that I like doing outside of the gym, learning more, that sort of thing. I really like having that week there. Now, how to find how long you should deload? It's tough to say. I think that deloading after every 3 to 6 weeks in that range is going to be a good idea, and that I would just be cognizant of when you start to get to the point to where you're like, man, I'm feeling pretty beat up, I'm having some soreness bleed into my sessions from week to week, my performance is, I'm having a difficult time maintaining my performance. That's when I would deload. I think you could largely auto-regulate it if you want. So when you get to that point to where you have soreness from session to session, or you're having a tough time maintaining your performance, or you start seeing indicators of feeling beat up, that's a great time to kind of auto-regulate that deload and say, all right, next week I'm just going to deload. It's been 4 or 5 weeks, probably a good time. That's kind of how I would approach it, but I personally do it after every 3 weeks just because it works out with my life and I like it. And I've personally, as of late, been kind of doing a deload to where I do my first 2 sessions are basically I train, everything is like 3 or 4 reps in reserve, and I cut 1 set off of all of my week 1 volumes. So week 1 volume, cut 1 set off, everything to like 3 or 4 reps in reserve is what my first 2 sessions look like, and I take the rest of the week off. Just because I like that release a little bit. And that's how I approach it. There's a lot of ways to approach it. I feel like that way's a pretty good approach to where you get some of the benefits of this active recovery of still getting in the gym, still maintaining your strength, still doing that stuff in the first half of your week, still maintaining movement patterns, stuff like that. But you also get the complete psychological and my camera shut off there at the 30-minute mark. So I was probably answering Ryan's question. But Ryan, I don't know where I left off. So let me know if I totally just left everybody hanging there. Let me know in the comments. I'll pin a comment at the top with what I meant to say or meant to finish my thoughts or something like that. So let me know in the comments if I need to elaborate on what I was answering more. But the next question comes from Ritesh, and Ritesh we had a consultation for coaching and seems like a great guy. So I really appreciate you asking me a question. And if you are interested in coaching, there's a link below to set up a consultation, and I'd love to, help you out. So his question was, how valuable are front squats for hypertrophy if the upper back fatigues before the lower body? Well, I think that this question kind of answers itself a little bit. So like if the upper body gives out, like your upper back, you're just holding the bar in that uncomfortable choking position, limits your set instead of your actual quads, your actual muscle, then yeah, I do think that is going to limit your hypertrophy on that movement, because your quads aren't the limiting factor there. It's actually your upper back and your wrists or whatever's like in pain. Plus, there's probably not a great stimulus to fatigue ratio on front squats because you're getting a lot of fatigue from just holding the bar on your clavicle and on your wrists and your elbows and your upper back. And that might limit your set more than your quads. So you're not getting as much stimulus on your quads, but you're getting a lot of fatigue. So not a great stimulus to fatigue ratio there. So I honestly don't think front squats are like a must-do exercise or a must-do lift for your quads. And I would say that a lot of people might get more out of a back squat, a hack squat, a Smith squat, a leg press in comparison to front squats. I do think that. So I wouldn't say they're necessarily inherently that valuable for hypertrophy for those reasons. However, if you know my history at all, you know I love front squats, and you know I love myself some front squats. And part of that is because I'm a little bit of a masochist, and I like doing stuff that a lot of people just are uncomfortable with and don't like doing. And I think that if you can get through the first couple weeks of front squats to where it feels uncomfortable and you hate it and it hurts your clavicle and your wrists and stuff like that, if you can get through that and you can get used to that stress a little bit and adapt to that stress a little bit, then it can be a great movement for your quads. Because I can squat deeper with front squats, and man, one set of front squats and I feel like my quads are ripping apart, and I get a crazy pump with my quads. And there's no other exercise that makes my quads sore like front squats, which tells me that I am overloading my quads quite well with front squats. Even after doing them for so long, I still feel this way about them. Like, I've got some emotional attachment to front squats, which apparently I do. Not in a weird way, though, however. Regardless, I still really like them. I still think that they can be a really great movement for the quads once you kind of get through that phase of this exercise sucks. Once you get through that, then I think they can be great, because by holding them out in front of you, I think it helps with getting deeper. I think it really helps tax the quads quite a bit and can be a really great exercise. But I also think that there's nothing inherently special about them. You can still stress your quads with other exercises, and some people may never want to do them and may never really get that much of a benefit out of them because it just stresses their entire body too much, and that limits their sets rather than their quads. So hopefully that helps you out there, Ritesh. That's kind of what I think on front squats. I still love them, though. And the final question is from Massanad. How much optimality are you sacrificing if you stop a mass phase at 10 to 14% compared to 10 to 18%? So you're staying a little bit leaner. And really hard to say. I think it largely depends on what your like natural settling range is. So your settling range is a range in which you perform well, you don't have any food focus, you're plenty satiated, you feel good in general, you have a good balance of like life stuff and but also being relatively lean. That's a pretty decent settling range. And I think if you have a naturally lower settling range to where you've always been pretty lean and you've always felt just fine at pretty lean body weights and body fat percentages, and you've performed really well in the gym at these lower body weights and stuff, then there's probably not going to be a huge benefit to going to all the way up to 18 to 20% compared to cutting a cut off at 14 to 16%. Probably not. Now, I do think that there's something potentially too hanging out at heavier body weights, just because you might get a little bit more of a mechanical advantage while you're lifting and overload your muscles a little bit more. Your body is in a constant state of energy surplus. You have plenty of excess energy around to build muscle. You have full glycogen levels all the time. Like, there might be some benefits to hanging out at higher body fat. So I don't want you to think that if you're naturally lean, you shouldn't ever go up to higher body weights, because I still think it can be beneficial. But I think if you're already naturally pretty lean and have a lower settling range, that you're not going to sacrifice much optimality by staying a little bit leaner. Now, on the contrary, if you're someone like myself and really doesn't feel good until you basically don't have your abs anymore and you are probably around like 14 to 16% body fat, then you're 100% going to be sacrificing gains from trying to stay below that range. and below that range in which you feel good, and would really benefit from pushing up to 18 to 20%, somewhere in that range. And that's hard to measure anyways. So I think that the best recommendation I have for this is to figure out a point, body weight, to where it's like, this is about as low as I can go before my performance starts dropping off, before I start getting a lot of hunger, before I start to feel the effects of dieting, before I don't feel like I can maintain it much, before my, like I said, training performance really suffers. Try to find that kind of lower range. And then once you find that lower range, let's consistently gain some weight at 1 to 3 pounds a month over the course of several months. And let's gain until we're at a point to where we're just not super comfortable with how we're looking anymore. We're not really seeing an proportional increase in our performance compared to the weight we're gaining. So maybe you're gaining weight, but your performance isn't really going up anymore. Maybe you're feeling more lethargic because you're gaining weight, and maybe you're just uncomfortable with how you're looking after 4 to 6 months of doing that. Then you can cut back down to that lower end, rinse and repeat. And I think that is a really great approach, especially for people that generally want to be pretty lean, but they also want to make really good gains. Now, if you want to be the best bodybuilder ever, I would probably be a little bit, I don't know, man. Because at some point you're going to have to cut down anyways. So it's going to be a longer cut too. So I would probably take a similar approach as well. Maybe I would hang out at those higher body fats a little bit more to see if it helps with that mechanical advantage and performance and stuff like that. But that's kind of the approach that I would take. So to answer your question directly, if you're already naturally lean and you feel good in the 10 to 15% range, I think you can fluctuate that and probably not give up a ton of optimality. Although I do think there could be some benefits to trying out getting a little heavier and seeing if that really helps performance. But for someone that they don't feel good until they already think they're at around 14 to 15%, then they really would be sacrificing things. And I would just try to find that low point of where you feel good, gain weight nice and slowly for several months if you can, and then maybe cut back down to that lower end, rinse and repeat. And then over time, you're going to build more muscle. You're going to look better at better body fat percentages, at higher body fat percentages, and you're going to look leaner in that range, and things should be good. So thank you so much for your questions. Make sure to leave them down below, and I will see you next Sunday for another Q&A.